Part 2. Cold Fear. Chapter 12. Using Her Powers. Back in Shadyside, Corky could barely remember the last days of camp. Everything was a blur since she had discovered the awful truth. This Saturday afternoon found Corky in her room. "Corky, what are you doing?" Her mother's concerned voice called through the closed door. "Just resting," Corky called back, raising her head from the pillow. Dressed in faded jeans and a sleeveless yellow t-shirt, she had thrown herself onto her bed after lunch. Thoughts washed about in her head like unruly ocean waves. Strange thoughts. Thoughts that weren't entirely her own. "Are you sick?" her mother called in. "It's not like you to rest on a Saturday afternoon." "I'm just tired," Corky replied impatiently. "You know, from cheerleader camp." She listened to her mother pad down the stairs. Then she buried her head deep in the pillow, trying to drown out the roaring in her ears. Cheerleader camp. What a dreadful week. She stayed in her dorm room after she had made her horrifying discovery. She told everyone she was sick. What choice did she have? She couldn't go to any of the workshops or practices. She couldn't perform in the evening competitions. She was too afraid she might hurt someone. Or worse. She had stayed in bed when Kimmy or Hannah were in the room. She tried to talk to them as little as possible. Miss Green got a doctor to come examine Corky, but, of course, he found nothing wrong. Nothing wrong. What a laugh, she thought bitterly. Sometimes the evil force faded a little. Sometimes it let her think clearly. Sometimes it gave her just enough time to herself to become afraid, truly afraid. And then the roar. The endless roar would return, and her memories would leave her, and she would move in a world of deep red and darker black and not remember. Not remember anything at all, except the fear. Lying on top of her bed covers, tossing uncomfortably, feeling the weight of the ancient evil, she remembered everything now. So clearly. Too clearly. She remembered sitting in the coffee shop with the other girls, making the pea soup spurt up over the table. Why? Because they had teased her? And just because she could. She remembered reaching out across the gym, reaching to trip Blair O'Connell. What a pleasing sight that was, and what a pleasing sound. That crack, that crunch. The sound of her face hitting the floor, her teeth breaking. How satisfying. The shimmering red blood that flowed from her wounded mouth. And there was more. More! She remembered getting up in the early hours of morning, the sky still heavy with night. She remembered creeping to the desk drawer and silently removing her scissors. She remembered working carefully to cut off Hannah's disgusting black braid. She remembered the soft, nearly silent snip, snip, as she moved the blade through the thick hair. And she remembered placing the severed braid neatly on top of Hannah's covers so she would see it the moment she woke up. That was fun. But later, her fun had been interrupted. Kimmy burst in to spoil her fun, spoil her chance to murder Hannah. That had made her so angry, the roar had drowned out all her thoughts. She had disappeared inside herself, somewhere far away. And now. Corky sat up, uttering a low cry. She suddenly understood the dreams about Bobby. She suddenly understood what Bobby had been trying to tell her in those sickening, awful dreams. When Bobby had opened her skull and pointed to the horrors inside, Bobby was telling Corky, "Look inside your own head. Look inside yourself. The horror is inside you." "Now I understand, Bobby," Corky said out loud. And as she said this, her bed rose. She grabbed the covers as the bed began to writhe and toss like a bus on a bumpy road. "No, oh no, please, no!" The foot of the bed bucked as if trying to throw her off. Then the covers began to roll over her, the bed trembling and shaking. "No! Oh, please, stop!" She clung to the bedspread, tightening her grip, holding on for dear life. The headboard slapped loudly against the wall. The covers flapped as if being blown by a hurricane wind. The mattress buckled and bumped. "Help me! Please! Stop it! Stop it!" Terrified, she rolled off the bed and toppled onto the floor. As she hit the floor, landing on her elbows and knees, the carpet began to undulate in waves, rising, then buckling back down, flapping noisily. The curtains beside her windows flew straight out as if reaching for her. The windows rose, then slammed down. "Please, stop! Stop!" Her perfume bottles and cosmetics flew up from her dresser top and hovered near the ceiling. The windows opened and shut more rapidly as the curtains continued to flap wildly. Struggling to her feet, Corky was tossed helplessly about by the rocking, undulating carpet. She reached up toward her dresser, but the moving carpet pulled her back. The mirror above the dresser burst into flames, then appeared to melt. She gaped in open-mouthed horror as the silvery lava poured down over the front of the dresser onto the throbbing, bucking floor. And then she saw the puddle of dark blood on the carpet just in front of her. "Please, somebody! Please, stop!" As she stared down at it, struggling to focus her eyes, the puddle began to bubble and then expand. The dark wetness crept wider until it was underneath her, until it spread over the throbbing carpet, until she was swimming in it, drowning in it, drowning in the thick, dark blood, thrashing her arms and legs, kicking frantically, trying to swim, but feeling herself pulled down, sucked down into the bubbling, dark ooze. "No!" Thrashing wildly, Corky struggled to keep her head up as the blood bubbled, red waves rocking and crashing over her, sweeping her away, pulling her down. "Why are you doing this to me? Why are you torturing me? Leave me alone!" Was she screaming the words, or only thinking them? The bedroom door opened. Someone stood over her. Panting loudly, she raised her eyes. "Sean!" Her little brother stared at her, hands in his jeans pockets. His blue eyes wide with surprise. "What's going on? What are you doing down there?" Gripping the carpet tightly between her fingers, crouching on all fours, Corky stared up at him. "Man, you're messed up!" he exclaimed, laughing. I guess I had a bad dream," Corky explained weakly. She pulled herself up to her knees. Red then black, red then black. The roar in her ears was a steady rush in the background. She let her eyes dart around the room. Normal. Everything was back to normal. Of course. "Come to my room," Sean demanded, grabbing her hand and tugging it. "Why?" she asked. The roar grew louder, closer. "I want to show you something." He tugged harder. "Something I did on the computer." She tried to stand up, but the dizziness pushed her down. Her head weighed 1,000 pounds. The roar drowned out her thoughts, red then black, then red again. The world was only 2 colors. "Come on!" Sean cried impatiently. And suddenly, without realizing it, she was hugging him, holding on to him, pulling him close, closer, holding on to him because he was real, because he was good, so good. "Hey, what's the big idea?" he cried, trying to squirm out of her grasp. The roar made everything vibrate, every breath echo loudly in her mind. Red then black, then red, then black. Holding on to Sean, she wrestled him playfully to the carpet. He laughed and squirmed. He reached up and put a headlock on her with his bony arms. Sean liked to wrestle. She ducked out of his hold and grabbed a slender arm. I can break his arm, Corky thought. Yes, I can break both his arms. It would be so easy, just snap them in two. Yes, said the roar, the insistent roar in her head. It would be so easy. Crack, crack. Yes! Feeling the strength, the awesome strength of her powers, Corky grabbed Sean's arm and started to bend it back. Chapter 13. We have to kill the others. Corky bent Sean's slender arm behind his back. Ow! He protested, struggling to free himself. You're hurting me! He wasn't strong enough to loosen her grip. She pulled the arm up, listening for the shoulder to crack. Ow! Stop! Sean screamed. She bent the arm up even more. Then, suddenly, she let go, and Sean burst free. Get out! Corky screamed to her startled brother. Get out! Get out now! He ran to the door, his blue eyes wide, his expression bewildered. Turning, he glared back at her. What's your problem, jerk? Get out, Sean! Get out! He tossed his blonde hair back angrily. First you want to wrestle, then you kick me out? You're a jerk! Just get out, she moaned, feeling her entire body start to tremble. He was already out the door and heading down the stairs. I almost hurt him, Corky thought, terrified. I almost broke his arm. Somehow the evil backed off just before... She heard laughter, cold and dry, almost a cough. Corky glanced around the room, but she knew immediately that the laughter was inside her head. It grew louder, cruel laughter, taunting her. She covered her ears with her hands, pressing hard. She tried to shut the evil sound out, but it grew louder still. Leave me alone! Leave me alone! She screamed, not recognizing her own voice. She fell onto her bed and pulled the pillow down over her head. But the cold, dark laughter inside her mind grew louder and louder. Corky dreamed that she was on a boat. She could feel the gentle swaying, the rise and fall of the wooden deck beneath her feet. It was a bright day, sunny and warm. The cloudless sky was a vivid blue. The sun, reflected in the water, sent trickles of gold leaping around the white boat. Corky could see herself standing on the swaying deck, leaning gently against the polished rail. She was dressed all in white. Her dress, floor-length and old-fashioned, had long sleeves with lacy cuffs. The skirt billowed in the soft wind. The frilly top had a high-necked lacy collar. On her head, she wore a wide-brimmed straw hat with a red ribbon around the crown tied in a bow to hang long down her neck. How strange, Corky thought, to be in the dream and be able to watch the dream at the same time. The colors were all so lovely. The sparkling gold-blue water, the white pleasure boat, the pale sky, her shimmering dress. There were 2 children with her, slender and blonde, also dressed in white Victorian clothes. Very dressy, Corky thought. Not for sailing. The boat slid gently through the shimmering, calm waters. The children called her Sarah. The sun felt warm on her face. I'm not me, Corky thought. I'm someone called Sarah. Sarah, watch me, the little boy said. He hoisted himself onto the deck rail and struck a brave pose. Get down from there, Sarah scolded gently, laughing despite herself. Get down at once! The boy obediently hopped down. Corky watched him chase the little girl along the bright deck. Sarah lifted her face to the sun. Suddenly, the boat heeled hard to the right. Sarah grabbed the deck rail to steady herself, to stop herself from toppling over. "What's happening?" Corky wondered, feeling Sarah's alarm. "Why is the boat tilting?" The boat lurched, then heeled up in the other direction. Sarah clung tightly to the rail. She could feel the fear creep up her back. The boat began to spin rapidly, as if caught in some kind of whirlpool. "What's happening? Where is the sun? Why are we spinning like this?" The sky was suddenly black as the swirling, frothing waters that lapped up noisily against the twirling boat. Corky felt Sarah's fear. It washed over her, weighing her down, freezing her in place. "Sarah! Sarah!" The children's voices, tiny and frightened, called to her. She grabbed the deck rail with both hands now, but the rail was no longer a rail. It had transformed itself into a thick white snake. The snake raised its head, opened its venomous jaws, and started to hiss at Sarah. Then Corky woke up. Drenched in cold perspiration, she sat up straight, gasping for air. She blinked and rubbed her eyes, rubbing away the vision of the hideous hissing snake. "I'm back," she thought, "back in my room." The dream had been so real. It hadn't felt like a dream, more like a memory, a powerful memory. She looked over at her bedside clock, 7:30. Outside her windows, the sky was the color of charcoal. "I slept right through dinner," Corky realized. What a frightening dream. But why did it seem so familiar? Almost as if she had lived it before. And why had the children called her Sarah? Still feeling shaky, still feeling the frightening pull of the boat as it spun, Corky lowered her feet to the floor. She opened her mouth in a wide yawn, and as she yawned, she heard a hissing sound. The hissing of the snake? Like a strong, unending wind escaping from deep within her. She tried to close her mouth, but it wouldn't close. The hissing grew louder, and Corky could feel something pour from her mouth. A disgusting, putrid odor invaded her nose as green gas spewed from her open mouth. "From inside me," she thought in horror, "and I can't stop it." She sat helplessly as the green gas poured out of her mouth, filling the room with its powerful stench. "Help me! Oh, help me! I can't stop it! I can't close my mouth! It smells so bad!" The green gas roared out of her mouth. More and more. "I'm going to vomit forever! Forever!" Corky thought, her entire body trembling as the green gas spewed out. When it was finally out, the hissing stopped. Weak, Corky fell back against her headboard, dizzy and drained. The room was filled with the putrid mist. It hovered hot and wet, like a heavy fog. "Don't sit back. We have work to do," said a voice that crackled like wind through dry leaves. "Huh? Work? What work?" Corky managed to stammer breathlessly. Pressed up against her headboard, trembling violently, unable to stop her body from shuddering. "We have to kill the others. The ones who betrayed you," whispered the voice in the disgusting green fog. "Let's start with Deborah." Chapter 14. Killing Deborah. "No!" Corky screamed in a high-pitched voice she'd never heard before. She pressed her back against the headboard, trying to escape the foul odor, the smoky green shadow that hovered over the room. Shaking all over, chills rolling down her back, she realized that her room had become icy cold. "I won't kill Deborah!" Corky insisted. crossing her arms protectively over the front of her t-shirt. She stared hard at the shadow as it billowed silently in front of her.
But Deborah turned against you. She chose Hannah over you,
came the dry whisper.
Now Deborah must pay.
No! I won't let you! Corky screamed shrilly. The evil voice laughed, dry laughter like breaking twigs.
You won't let me?
The heavy mist rose up toward the ceiling.
But you are me.
No! Corky protested.
You are me, and I am you.
No, please! The voice laughed again. The green fog folded in on itself, billowing and bending in the dark, cold room. And then it floated rapidly up to the ceiling, her entire body shuddering violently, gripped in panic, Corky's breath caught in her throat. She stared in horror as the green gas spread over the ceiling, blanketing the light fixture to darken the room. Corky grabbed her bedspread and pulled it up to her chin. She thought of burrowing beneath it, but she knew that it wouldn't hide her from this powerful evil. Above her, the gas bubbled and billowed. Then, suddenly, it began to rain down on Corky, a heavy green dew, foul-smelling and damp. Corky closed her eyes and covered her face with both hands. The heavy dew descended over her, smothered her with its odor, heavier, heavier, weighing her down as if it were a heavy old quilt. I can't breathe, she thought. It's suffocating me. Heavier, heavier. She felt so sleepy, so far away. The room seemed to fade into the distance. She seemed to fade with it. As the sickening green liquid fell on her, Corky was floating away from herself. Floating into the grayness. Floating far away as the green gas filled her up, filled her mind, took over her body. In a short while, Corky was gone. The evil force was completely in control. She stood up, straightened her t-shirt, and walked over to her phone, taking long, steady strides. Picking up the receiver, she punched in Deborah's number. A few seconds later, Deborah was on the other end. Can we meet? Corky asked calmly. I have something important to tell you. Deborah agreed. Corky pulled a brush through her hair, then hurried downstairs. She grabbed up the car keys and called to her parents that she'd be back in a few hours. Then she headed out to kill Deborah. Chapter 15. So easy to kill. Gripping the steering wheel tightly in both hands, Corky leaned forward against the shoulder belt and headed the blue Accord along Old Mill Road in the direction of the Division Street Mall. I'm coming, Deborah, she thought. I'm coming to get you. A smile passed across her face as she blinked her eyes in the white glare of oncoming headlights. Deborah and Hannah, they were quite a team at camp, just about inseparable. Well, I think I can separate you now, Corky thought darkly. I think the grave will separate you from your pal Hannah. The thought pleased Corky greatly as she remembered how Deborah had refused to interrupt her conversation with Hannah to come talk to her. How Deborah went everywhere with Hannah, forgetting entirely about Corky. How Deborah defended Hannah. How Deborah voted that Hannah should have the top spot on the pyramid. Deborah, Deborah, Deborah. What a bad choice you made, Corky thought. She sped up to pass a slow-moving station wagon filled with kids. Shadows rolled across her smiling face as the tall street lamps whirred past. After waiting at the spotlight, she made a left onto Division Street, unexpectedly crowded with cars inching along. Deborah had explained over the phone that she had to pick up some things for her mother at the mall. Mom had kids just so she'd have slaves. Deborah had complained. That's all she does ever since I got my driver's license. Sends me off to the mall to buy stuff for her. Corky had tusk-tusked sympathetically, thinking all the while about how much she was going to enjoy seeing the end of Deborah. Deborah and her cold blue eyes. Deborah and that chic, short haircut. Deborah in that goofy crystal she was always fingering as if it had some strange power. Power? What a laugh. I'll show her power, Corky thought gleefully. She had arranged to meet Deborah in the far corner of the parking lot in the back of the big Dalby's department store. No one parked back there, Corky knew, unless the rest of the lot was filled. It would most likely be deserted this time of night. Corky turned the Accord into the mall and headed for the back. She saw two boys from school standing at the ticket window to the Sixplex movie theater. She stopped to let a woman pushing a filled shopping cart pass, then continued behind the department store. This vast lot was nearly deserted, dotted only with cars that probably belonged to store workers. Corky's eyes eagerly roamed the dim-lit lot. Yes, there was all alone at the back of the lot, her hands stuffed in her jeans pockets. This is so easy, Corky thought. So totally easy. Aiming the car at Deborah, she pushed her foot down hard on the gas pedal. All the way down. The car lurched forward with a roar. Deborah, staring at the other end of the lot, didn't notice her at first. Then her mouth dropped open in a silent scream, and her eyes bulged with fright as she realized the blue Accord was roaring at her. So easy, Corky thought gleefully. This is so easy. Chapter 16. Try again. As the car roared toward its target, Corky leaned forward against the shoulder belt, her eyes glowing with anticipation, her lips twisted in a triumphant grin. Captured in the twin white headlights, Deborah's face was a perfect portrait of horror. She knows she's dead, Corky thought gleefully. She can already feel it. She can already feel the car as it crushes her, the pain coursing through her body, the gasping for breath that won't come. Die, Deborah! Die! As the car roared toward collision, Deborah leapt away, out of the light, onto a low concrete divider. Corky's car slammed into the divider with a deafening crunch. Then it bounced off and lurched into a lamppost. Oof! Corky was jolted hard, forward so that the steering wheel shot into her chest, then back, her head slamming against the headrest with jarring force. She stared straight ahead into the darkness, waiting for the pain to stop shooting through her body. Silence. The engine must have cut off. Where's Deborah? Corky wondered, unfastening the seatbelt. Did she get away? The pain melted quickly. The ancient powers pushed the pain away. Maybe Deborah is under the car, Corky thought hopefully. Loud, insistent tapping on the window beside her head startled her. She turned to see Deborah, alive and healthy, tapping with one hand, a worried look on her face. Corky, are you okay? Are you hurt? Sighing in disappointment, Corky pushed open the car door. I'm okay. She climbed out into the sultry night air. What happened? Deborah demanded. I was so scared. I thought you were going to mow me down. The accelerator stuck, Corky told her. I couldn't get the car to slow down. I completely lost control. How awful, Deborah exclaimed. Impulsively, she hugged Corky. You're really okay? You hit that post pretty hard. Corky took a step back and examined the car. The left bumper had been crushed in. Dad'll have a cow, she said, shaking her head. But you're okay? Your head? Your neck? Deborah's face revealed her concern. I'm fine, really, Corky replied impatiently. How about you? My heart is still racing, but I'm fine, Deborah told her. Get in, Corky said, motioning toward the passenger door. I've got to talk to you. It's pretty important. Maybe we should call a tow truck, or your dad or something, Deborah suggested. No, the car will probably still drive, Corky said, lowering her eyes to the damaged bumper. I'll test it. Come on, get in. This is important. Why don't we take my car? Deborah insisted, pointing to her red Geo on the other side of the divider. I want to try my car, Corky snapped angrily. I'll drop you off at your car when we're finished, okay? Deborah stared at her intently. Wow, Corky, I've never seen you like this. Well, I'm worried about Kimmy, and I need to talk to you, Corky said. She lowered herself back into the driver's seat and slammed the door shut. Drumming her fingers on the steering wheel, she waited while Deborah made her way around the car and climbed into the passenger seat, a thoughtful expression on her pretty face. Kimmy? What about Kimmy? Deborah asked. I talked to her this afternoon. She seemed fine. Corky didn't reply. She turned the key, and the engine started right up. Turning her head to the back window, she eased the car away from the divider. The car's okay now? Deborah asked. The gas pedal, It's fine, Corky told her, shifting into drive and heading toward the mall exit. Isn't that strange? Yeah, Deborah agreed, studying Corky. I'm glad. That was a close one. A nervous giggle escaped her throat. I was so scared, Corky said, heading the car back in the direction she had come. Where are we going? Deborah asked, turning to face the front, pulling on her seatbelt. Let's go to the old mill, Corky suggested. It's so quiet there. A good place to talk. Deborah seemed reluctant. That broken down old mill? It's completely falling apart. It's quiet, Corky repeated. A good place to kill you, Deborah. Are you feeling better? Deborah asked, her eyes on the shadowy trees rolling past in the darkness. I mean, since cheerleader camp? We were all so worried about you. That was weird, wasn't it? Corky said. It must have been a virus or something, some kind of bug. But you're okay now? Corky shrugged. I guess. I still feel a little knocked out. I completely vegged out this afternoon. Took a long nap. Like a 2-year-old. Would you believe it? Deborah tusked. They drove in silence for a few moments. When you were sick at camp, Hannah did such a good job of taking up the slack. Deborah gushed. I wish you could have seen her. She was awesome. Corky nodded, but didn't reply. What about Kimmy? Deborah demanded a short while later, turning in her seat to stare at Corky. We have to do something, Corky said, lowering her voice. I'm just so scared. She turned off Old Mill Road onto the gravel path that led through the trees to the deserted mill. You mean? Deborah started, her lips forming an O of surprise. You still have all those books on the occult? Corky asked. The deserted mill, a 2-story wooden structure with a tall wheel on one side, rose up in the headlights. Corky cut the engine and the lights and pushed open her car door. Yeah, I still have them. Deborah reached reflexively for the crystal she wore on a chain around her neck. I'm still really interested in all that stuff, but... Corky's sneakers crunched over the gravel as she led the way to the mill and the almost dry stream beside it. She was pleased to see there were no other cars there. Shadyside students often used the mill as a place to make out. The fresh spring leaves rustled in the trees behind them. The air was fragrant and soft. The old mill loomed in front of them, black against the dark purple sky. A sliver of pale moon was cut in half by a wisp of black cloud. Do you think the evil spirit is in Kimmy again? Deborah asked reluctantly, hurrying to catch up to Corky. I think so, Corky replied somberly. Taking longer strides, she made her way past a broken gate. Stepping over the fallen door, she walked into the old mill yard. "That's horrible," Deborah exclaimed breathlessly. "Hey, Corky, wait up!" Ignoring Deborah's plea, Corky picked up her pace. Stepping over loose boards and other debris, she made her way across the yard to the towering mill wheel. It stood like a black Ferris wheel against the purple sky. "Corky, where are you going?" Deborah demanded. She had to jog to catch up. "I thought you wanted to talk." "It's all so scary," Corky said, gazing up to the top of the rigid old wooden wheel. She raised her hands and gripped a wooden slat just above her head. "It feels good to use up some energy. Nervous energy, you know?" "Hey, Corky, stop," Deborah said, breathing hard. "I don't feel like climbing tonight." Corky had already hoisted herself onto the wheel and was pulling herself up slat by slat to the top. The owners had locked the wheel so it no longer moved. Climbing the wheel was a popular sport among Shadyside teenagers. Sometimes they had races to see who could get up to the top first. Sometimes kids did a high wire act, walking along the top of the wheel with their arms straight out, balancing precariously as they moved. Sometimes they had competitions to see how many people they could squeeze on the top. "Hey, Corky, this is dangerous," Deborah protested. Corky, halfway up the wheel, was pleased to see that her companion was following. She began to climb even quicker. "Corky, stop! It's slippery on this thing, from the rain yesterday. Corky, why do we have to climb up here?" Deborah cried. Corky pulled herself up to the top of the wheel and stood up. Stretching, she glanced around. Great view, she thought. She could see the dried-up stream and the entire mill yard, cluttered with trash and broken boards. Beyond the high fence, her car parked at the end of the gravel path. Beyond that, dark trees. Darkness. Darkness stretching forever. She reached down and helped Deborah climb onto the top. Deborah rested her knees on the damp wood, then reluctantly got to her feet. "This is dumb," she said, catching her breath. "Great view," Corky replied softly, staring out at the trees. "You said you wanted to talk," Deborah complained, shaking her head. "We could talk on the ground too, you know." "You afraid of heights?" Corky asked, turning her eyes on Deborah. "No, not really." "You should be," Corky thought, studying her friend. "You should be very afraid of heights, Deborah." "Why are we up here?" Deborah asked, leaning forward, bending her knees and resting her hands on her thighs. "To get a different perspective," Corky replied seriously. "Huh?" "I don't know," Corky shrugged, smiling. "I feel safer up here. Weird, huh?" "Safer? You mean from Kimmy?" Deborah asked, wrinkling her forehead. "Yeah, from Kimmy. From everything," Corky told her. A gust of warm air fluttered through Corky's hair. She edged closer to Deborah, balancing carefully. "Well, I don't know what to say about Kimmy," Deborah said, still hunched forward. "It's all so frightening." "That's okay," Corky thought. "You won't have to be frightened anymore." "Bye, Deborah. It's been nice knowing you. Have a nice flight. And happy landings." She reached out both hands and grabbed Deborah's shoulders to push her over the side. Chapter 17. Something to Look Forward to. As Corky put her hands on Deborah's shoulders, Deborah smiled up at her, unaware of her intentions. "I'm okay," she said. "No, you're not," thought Corky. "You're not okay. You're dead." She tensed her arm muscles and started to push.
"Hey, you girls, get down from there!"
The man's voice startled Corky back. "Oh!" she cried out and nearly toppled off the wheel.
"Get down!"
The man shouted angrily. A bright light from a flashlight invaded Corky's face, then darted over to Deborah.
Don't you know it's dangerous?
Corky squinted down to see a man in a sweatshirt and denim overalls, staring up at them, moving his flashlight from one to the other. "We're not doing anything," Deborah called down.
You're trespassing,
The man yelled up.
Now get down before I call the police.
Okay, we're coming, Deborah said. She lowered herself to a sitting position. Then, flipping over onto her stomach, she carefully climbed down the side. Corky remained standing at the top, her anger surging, the ancient evil rising up until her entire body felt as if it were on fire. "I'm going to explode," she thought. "Then I'm going to twist that guy's head around until I hear his neck crack. Then I'll rip his head off and pull the brains out through his neck." The angry thoughts crackled like electricity in her mind. But staring down at Deborah as she made her way slowly to the ground, Corky's fury cooled. "Why waste my time on that idiot?" she thought. "Deborah's my real target. Deborah is the one who must die." Corky lowered herself quickly down the side of the old mill wheel. Stepping onto the soft ground, she glowered at the man with the flashlight.
I know you young people think you'll live forever,
he said, keeping the light on her face.
But you really shouldn't test your luck up there.
"I will live forever," Corky thought, feeling her anger begin to seethe again. But she kept herself under control. "You can skip the lecture," she said dryly, then hurried to catch up with Deborah, who was already crunching over the gravel to the car. A short while later, Corky dropped Deborah off at her car in the deserted parking lot behind the mall. "We didn't really get to talk," Deborah said quietly, pushing open the car door. "I'll kill you tomorrow," Corky told her. Deborah's eyes opened wide. "Huh? What did you say?" "I said I'll call you tomorrow," Corky replied, realizing her slip. "Oh." Deborah's eyes narrowed again. She giggled nervously. "I guess I didn't hear you right." She gave Corky a wave and slammed the door behind her. "You heard right. I'll kill you tomorrow," Corky thought. Something to look forward to. "I'll kill you tomorrow, Deborah," she thought, turning and heading the car toward the exit. "Then Kimmy will have to die. Kimmy knows too much, way too much. All that knowledge is a dangerous thing. So, goodbye, Deborah, and goodbye, Kimmy. Goodbye, cheerleaders. I'm afraid that from now on, I'll be the only one with something to cheer about." Corky chuckled to herself, pleased with her amusing thoughts. "So much to look forward to," she told herself, turning onto Fear Street, heading for home. Hannah's smiling face flashed into her mind. "Don't worry, Hannah," Corky said aloud. "I haven't forgotten you. I'll be looking in on you real soon to finish what I started." Chapter 18. Sinking Deep. Corky awoke, wide awake, alert. She saw the brass light fixture with its white globe above her head. The curtains hanging straight and still in front of the dark windows, the hairbrush resting on the edge of the dresser top. Everything was so clear, in such sharp focus, as if all that had come before had been a blur, a dream. She sat straight up and gazed at her bed table clock. 3:07, the middle of the night. What had awakened her? And why did she feel so light? Something is different, Corky realized. Something has changed. Pale shadows flitted over the ceiling. They were so clear, so amazingly clear. And then Corky realized the evil spirit was gone. She was herself again, seeing things for herself, thinking her own thoughts. "I'm me," she thought. "It's gone! It's really gone!" Excitedly, she pushed down the covers and started to jump up, but a heavy feeling held her back. A feeling she couldn't locate. A presence. Somewhere inside her. She sank back onto the bed. It's still there, she knew. Is it sleeping? Did the ancient evil have to sleep too? How long do I have? She wondered sadly. How long do I have before it awakens and takes over again? And I am back to being a prisoner, an unwilling prisoner inside my own body? Thoughts raced through her mind. Desperate, frightened thoughts. Corky closed her eyes and took a deep breath. How can I get rid of it? She asked herself. How can I get my body back again? Before I kill my friends? The evil stirred within her. Stirred, but didn't waken. When it's awake, it's like I'm dreaming, Corky thought. I'm asleep somewhere in my own body, dreaming everything that's really happened. She thought suddenly of her dream. She was on the pretty sailboat, in the long white dress, sailing on the sparkling gold water. And the children called her Sarah. Sarah Fear? Corky struggled to remember the story of Sarah Fear. Months before, a strange young woman named Sarah Beth Plummer, a descendant of Sarah Fear, had told Corky the story, or part of it, before she had left town. Sarah Fear, Corky remembered, was a young woman who lived in the late 1800s. She, too, had been inhabited by the evil spirit. In the summer of 1898, she had gone sailing on Fear Lake, a beautiful calm day. But her pleasure boat capsized, and all aboard, including Sarah, drowned. Yes, Corky knew this story. This story had formed her dream. Only it wasn't really a dream. It was a small chunk of memory. A small chunk of Sarah Fear's memory. Is that crazy? Corky asked herself. Is it possible that Sarah Fear's memory was revealed to me while I sleep? It had to be a memory, she decided. It was too clear, too real to be a dream. Excited by these thoughts, Corky climbed out of bed and started to pace back and forth over her bedroom carpet. What does the dream mean? Why did I dream it? How did I get inside Sarah Fear's life? Again, she could feel the sleeping evil stir. She stopped pacing, waited, not breathing. It continued to sleep. Breathless with excitement, she sat down gently on the edge of the bed. She pictured Sarah Fear in her wide-brimmed straw hat and her long white dress, leaning on the rail of the gently bobbing sailboat. How did I see all that? Corky wondered, closing her eyes and trying to see it all again. How did I see it so clearly? Poor Sarah Fear. She had been inhabited by the evil spirit until she died. Corky opened her eyes, excited by a new thought. The spirit inhabited her, and it kept her memory. The evil force must have Sarah Fear's memories inside it, Corky realized. It must have all the memories of all the people it inhabited over the years. It took over their minds. It possessed their minds. And that meant it also possessed their memories. So somewhere deep within the mind of the ancient evil spirit, somewhere deep inside that sleeping evil, Sarah Fear's memory remained. And a little bit of it had escaped, had come to Corky while she slept. How can I get the rest of it? Corky asked herself. How can I get back into Sarah Fear's mind? She stopped, suddenly chilled. Why do I want to get into poor Sarah Fear's memories? What would be the point? Sarah Fear died almost 100 years ago. As quickly as she asked herself the questions, Corky knew the answers. Sarah Fear had been the only one to defeat the evil spirit. When Sarah Fear died, the evil spirit went to the grave with her. and the evil had remained inside her grave for nearly 100 years. I want to send the evil force to its grave, Corky thought, breathing hard, her mind spinning with ideas. I want to send the evil away, just as you did, Sarah. But how? How did you do it? Sarah Fear had died with that secret. But Corky knew the secret must live on in Sarah Fear's memory. And Sarah Fear's memory was somewhere inside Corky's mind. I just have to find it, Corky thought. I have to search until I find Sarah Fear's memory. I have to let myself sink down, down, down into Sarah Fear's memory. And then maybe I can learn from Sarah Fear how to defeat this evil. Corky suddenly realized that her entire body was trembling. Her hands and feet were ice cold. Her heart was thudding loudly in her chest. As these wild ideas continued to whir through her mind, she returned to bed, lowered herself between the cool sheets, and pulled the covers up over her chin. She closed her eyes and waited for her body to stop trembling, for the chills to stop, for her breathing to slow. Then, with her eyes still closed, she tried to concentrate. She pictured Sarah Fear, the swaying sailboat, the shimmering blue-gold water of the lake, forcing herself to breathe slowly. Slowly, she sank into the evil spirit's memory, slipping into shadows darker than any she had ever experienced. She sank, darker and even darker. Such darkness, such depths inside her own mind. Deeper, until she heard low moans and soft whimpers, cries of despair, and still deeper, into the ancient memory, into the memory of evil. The cries became howls, anguished yelps of pain and suffering. The darkness grew heavy and cold. Ghostly wisps of gray mist slithered like wounded animals in front of her. The howls of pain encircled her, pulled her down, down. As the anguished cries grew louder and the darkness became a living thing, a monstrous presence, a hungry, groping shadow that threatened to swallow her whole, Corky felt overwhelming fear. As if all the fear from all the people inhabited by the evil spirit had poured into her. Endless fear, endless pain, all inside her own mind, crying out to her, reaching for her, trying to grab her and pull her down into untold horrors from centuries past. No, I want to get out, Corky thought, struggling against the darkness, against the agony inside her. I don't want to be here. I don't want to hear this, to see this. But she had no choice now. Now it was too late. She was slipping back in time, deep into the memory of the foul thing inside her. Chapter 19. Sarah Fear's Secret. Standing at the rail, the sails rippling pleasantly beside her, Sarah Fear stared into the sparkling waters of Fear Lake. The boat created gentle blue-green waves as it cut through the water. Sarah stared down at the water, sprinkled with the gold of reflected sunlight. Such a calm day, she thought. So little wind. It will take forever to cross the lake. That was okay with Sarah. She was in no hurry. Sighing, she raised her pale face to the sun, closing her eyes. She stood still for a long time, letting the warmth settle over her. "Aunt Sarah?" A young boy's voice interrupted her peace. "Come sit with Margaret and me." Sarah opened her eyes and smiled down at Michael, her young nephew, bathed in yellow sunlight. He seemed to sparkle and shimmer like the water. His starched white sailor shirt and blonde curls glowed in the bright light as if on fire. "Come sit with us." "In a while," Sarah replied, placing a hand on his curls gently, reluctantly, as if they truly might be as hot as fire. I'm enjoying the light breeze here. I feel like standing for a while. Where is Father? Michael asked, searching the deck. He went below, Sarah replied, pointing to the stairs leading to the lower cabin. He has a dreadful headache. Poor man. We are moving too slowly, Michael complained. Yes, we want to go fast, his sister Margaret called from her seat across the wide deck. Sarah laughed. We can't go fast if there isn't any wind, she told them.
Michael, would you like to take the wheel?
Jason Hardy called from behind them. Sarah turned, startled by his voice. She had almost forgotten he was on the boat. Jason Hardy, Sarah's personal servant, was a tall, stern-faced man. His black mustache, waxed stiff, stuck out like bird wings on either side of his face. Dressed in a blue admiral's cap, matching blue blazer, and white sailor pants, he stood behind the wheel, motioning for Michael to join him. Me too! Cried Margaret, jumping up from her seat and starting toward the wheel. No, Margaret, Sarah scolded, laughing. Piloting a sailboat is a man's job. That wouldn't be ladylike, would it? I don't care. Margaret pouted, hands on her waist, but she stopped obediently halfway across the deck. Michael, beaming excitedly, grabbed the big wheel with both hands as Hardy instructed him on how to steer. Sarah turned back to the rail, taking a deep breath. In the near distance, she could see the green pines of Fear Island, the small round island in the center of the lake. The children look so good, so healthy, she thought wistfully. It's the happiest I've ever seen them since their mother died. Something fluttered near Sarah's face. Startled, she took a step back. It was a butterfly, black and gold, a monarch butterfly. You're a long way from shore, Sarah thought, admiring it as it hovered just over the rail. Did you follow us on the sailboat this afternoon? The butterfly fluttered silently just in front of her, hovering in place. Such delicate beauty, Sarah thought. She reached out, wrapping her fingers around it, and crushed it. A voice inside her head laughed cruelly. It was a laugh Sarah had heard many times before. Aunt Sarah! Margaret's surprised cry drowned out the sound. What did you do to that butterfly? Butterfly? Sarah turned her face to the little girl, a look of innocence on her face. What butterfly, Margaret? I didn't see it. She opened her palm and let the crushed remnants of the insect drop into the water. She wiped her hand on the rail. One more murder, Sarah thought bitterly. One more. A small cloud drifted across the sun. The rolling waters darkened around the boat. How many more murders? Sarah wondered silently, squeezing the rail with both hands. Many more, came the reply. As many as we desire, the familiar voice told her. Sarah shuddered. I want you gone, Sarah said aloud into the wind. Laughter.
I will never leave you,
said the voice of the evil that shared her body. I want you gone.
I am part of you,
The evil force declared. No, Sarah protested. Aunt Sarah? A hand tugged at her long skirt. Aunt Sarah, are you okay? Yes, fine, Sarah answered quickly, turning to Margaret, staring up at her, concern on her pretty, pale face. I'm fine, Margaret. Sarah turned to Jason Hardy. Give Margaret a turn at the wheel. We won't tell anyone. Margaret gave a squeal of joy and hurried to join her brother, her heavy black shoes loud on the wooden deck. Sarah's hand wrapped tighter around the rail, and she leaned forward until she could feel the cold spray on her face. So refreshing, so clean. She closed her eyes and remained still, her face catching the drops of spray. She loosened her grip on the rail and pressed hard against it with her corseted waist. I know how to kill you, she thought. I know how to get rid of you. I know how to free myself of your evil. She waited for the voice inside her head to reply. She didn't have to wait long.
You cannot kill me, Sarah.
A bitter smile formed on her pale lips. I know how. And then a cold shudder of doubt made her grip the rail again. I know how. I just don't know if I can bring myself to do it. The evil laughter echoed once more in her mind.
I will have to move to the children,
the evil spirit said, the cruelest threat of all. No! Sarah screamed.
Yes, I will live inside the children. First one, then the other. My evil shall live on, Sarah.
No! She looked down at the mirror-like surface, so clear, so pure. And as she stared, visions of the deeds she had been forced to do seemed to float up to the surface. They were shadowy at first and murky, but as they floated nearer to the top, the pictures became bright and clear. Sarah found herself facing her own evil. She saw herself murdering the man at the mill, the man who had caused her husband's accident. She saw the expression of utter disbelief on the man's face as she grabbed him and shoved him from behind. And she heard the crack and splat as she pushed his head under the mill wheel. And his head was ground up as fine as the corn. The woman who lived in the big house on the hill was even easier to murder. And what pleasure Sarah had taken in the crime. What delight. After all, the woman had insulted the Fears, insulted Simon Fear, insulted Sarah's dead husband, insulted the entire family. She couldn't utter any insults with that length of clothesline wrapped around her neck. Sarah had pulled the clothesline tighter and tighter until the woman's face was bright purple as the violets in her garden. So tight that the rope actually disappeared under the woman's skin, and the blood had flowed out in a perfect ring. The tiny town of Shadyside was in an uproar now. Who could be doing these ghastly murders? They were all frightened of the Fear family, but they sent the young police constable anyway. He was so young and handsome, Sarah thought, and he asked so many questions, too many questions. How lucky that Sarah was boiling an enormous pot of potatoes when the young police officer arrived. She had only to shove his head deep into the boiling water and wait. What a struggle he'd put up, thrashing his arms. But Sarah had held his head under until the thrashing stopped, until his breathing stopped, until he was dead, and he slumped lifeless over the black cast-iron stove. All of his hair had floated off, floated to the top of the pot, and when she finally pulled him up, his head was as white as a boiled potato and nearly as soft. So much for the police investigation. The residents of the town grew quiet and fearful. Neighbor avoided neighbor. Rumors were whispered. But a few words of accusation were murmured aloud. These pictures surfaced in the mirror-like lake water as Sarah leaned over the rail and stared down. No more, she whispered aloud.
There will be more,
the evil spirit inside her promised.
There will always be more.
No more, Sarah repeated, shaking her head. I know how to kill you, she thought, taking a deep breath. I know how to get rid of you.
I will move to the children,
came the ugly threat once again.
I will live inside Michael. I will live inside Margaret.
No, you won't, Sarah argued. No, you will die, evil spirit. I know how to drown you. A cruel laugh rang in her head.
Fool, I cannot be drowned.
Yes, you can, Sarah told it, a bitter smile spreading on her pretty face. Yes, you can. You can drown. You can.
I cannot be drowned.
You can be drowned, Sarah told it silently. If I drown first.
No,
the voice inside her quickly replied. But doubt and surprise colored the single word for the first time. "If I kill myself with you inside," Sarah told it, "then you will die with me." Sarah turned back to the children. Jason Hardy stood between them as they enthusiastically guided the wheel together. So innocent, she thought. They don't know anything at all about their evil Aunt Sarah. And I hope they never will. Sarah had known for a long time how to rid herself, how to rid the world, of the ancient evil force. She had known that she had to die in order for it to be killed. But ending her own life was too frightening to think about, too frightening to imagine, until the evil spirit mentioned the children. I have to save them, Sarah thought. I have to save them now. Her throat constricted as she stared down into the water. She uttered a low cry and leaned forward a little further. And as she leaned, the boat tilted, reared up as if facing a strong wind. Sarah was tossed back and landed sharply against the mast and toppled to the deck in a sitting position. She struggled to get back up as the craft began to twirl.
"What's happening?"
She heard Margaret's frightened voice behind her.
"Why are we spinning?" "It's so windy." "What's wrong with the boat?"
Sarah knew what was wrong with the boat. The evil spirit was working hard to keep her from throwing herself over the rail into the water. Around and around like a carousel the boat spun. Picking up speed, it sent up a high wall of water around it. Dizzy and terrified, her heart thudding, Sarah reached for the mast. She grabbed it to pull herself up. The boat reared up violently then and dipped low into the tossing water. Sarah's hand slipped off the mast, and she fell hard to the deck once again. The sky was black now, as black as night. The ring of water tossed up by the spinning boat encircled the boat and threatened to roll over it.
"You cannot drown me,"
the evil voice screamed inside Sarah's head.
"My evil lives forever."
As the boat spun faster and faster, Sarah heard the terrified cries of her little niece and nephew. "You will not get to them," she said out loud through gritted teeth. This time, she pulled herself to her feet. Water crashed down heavily and washed over the deck like a tidal wave. The boat heaved as it twirled, and the water tossed up high, frothing eerily in a circle around it. "You will not get the children," Sarah Fear declared, shouting at the evil inside her. She shut her eyes tightly and lunged blindly to the rail.
"Aunt Sarah!"
She heard the children's shrill voices, distant now, as if miles away.
"Aunt Sarah, come back!" "You cannot drown me."
"But I must."
"You haven't the courage to drown yourself."
Was the ancient evil right? Did she have the courage? Could she sacrifice her life, her young life, for Michael and Margaret?
"There will be more evil to come, Sarah. There will be much more evil."
"No!" And Sarah Fear dived under the rail into the dark, tossing waters under the black sky. Down into the cold water, churning and bubbling. Down she plunged, gulping in water, inhaling the heavy water, taking in mouthfuls as she descended, her hair loose and floating graceful around her head like a kind of sea creature, her arm pulling her deeper into the darkness, her lungs filling with the heavy water, choking, sputtering, no longer breathing, no longer seeing. "I'm drowning," she thought. "I'm not breathing now. Soon I will be gone. Soon, I hope." And as Sarah drowned, the evil thrashed inside her, fighting desperately as the water invaded her lungs. The spirit struggled to free itself. She felt it try to thrust itself out from her throat. The water bubbled as a stream of green gas erupted from her mouth. The eruption was so powerful that it forced Sarah to the surface. She saw the sailboat overturned, upside down. The children, she thought. And then she was underwater again. The water was hot, boiling, scalding hot, burning her skin, so unbearably hot, and the green gas poured into the tossing, boiling water.
"Up, rise up,"
the voice told her.
"Rise up and save us both."
But Sarah plunged lower, forcing herself down. Now she could feel two fears at once, her own and that of the ancient spirit. Both frightened now, both about to die, both dying, both. The boiling, bubbling water churned around her. The flowing green gas encircled her, shutting out all light. The spirit was trapped in Sarah's drowning body. The evil voice cried out,
No!
a wail of rage, of disbelief. The cry was strong at first, then weak, then a whimper of faint protest. The green gas bubbled away. Seraphir's eyes were bulging wide, but she saw nothing now. Not even the still, still blackness, for she and the evil were dead. Then, more darkness, rapidly swirling darkness, black moving against black. Corky slept without moving, as if in a coma, her breathing slow and silent. Deeper she sank, deeper into old memories. Shadows formed, twisting and bending in the darkness. Deeper, deeper. No longer in Seraphir's memory, sinking deeper inside the mind of the ancient evil. Deeper, until she entered the memory of the evil spirit itself. Now Corky looked out through the evil spirit's eyes and stared in bitter horror at the velvet-lined walls of a coffin. She was inside the coffin, 6 feet under the ground, trapped inside, hunkered low against the closed lid, inside the rotting corpse of Seraphir. Yes, Seraphir was dead, drowned in Fear Lake, and up above, poking up through the loamy cemetery ground, stood Seraphir's gravestone. Surrounded by 4 other stones, stones for Michael, for Margaret, for their father, and for Jason Hardy, all dead, all drowned in the boiling waters of the lake. And now the evil spirit shared Sarah's grave, imprisoned beside the foul, decaying body it once possessed, defeated by Sarah's courage, trapped by Sarah's final sacrifice. It waited eagerly for a live body to come along and free it. Waited, staring at the worms that invaded Sarah's grinning skull. Corky woke. She sat up, alert, wide awake, trembling. Her sheets were tangled, hot and damp from perspiration. She could still see Seraphir's corpse, the decaying walls of the small coffin. She could still hear the roar of the churning lake in her mind, still hear the hiss of the escaping green gas, still hear the hideous howl of the evil spirit dying. Corky swallowed hard. She realized she was crying. Hot tears rolled down her even hotter cheeks. Seraphir has told me all I need to know, she thought, letting the tears fall. To kill the evil, I have to kill myself.